When you answer these questions, you'll be able to know, okay, this is the best way I can create. My best bet for success is to be spontaneous. My best bet for success with video is to batch create. My best bet is to create a long form piece of content and repurpose it. And if you know that, then you are able to maximize the way you create content, and your chances of success are immediately higher because you go into the game with two eyes wide open about how you best create. Teaching you to make useful content so that you can build long-term relationships with the people that matter to your business.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Useful Content Podcast, and we're flipping the conversation a bit today. I am your guest host. My name is Christine McLean Lewis, and I will be asking your lovely, all the time, always there host, Juma Bannister, the questions today. He's going to be the teacher. And we all know Juma as the video expert, the video marketing expert. And I had a few questions that I wanted to have a conversation with him about. And he said, yeah, let's do a podcast interview. Let's get this done. Let's dive into these questions in a lovely podcast. So that's why we're here today. And we're going to be talking about 5 core video marketing tactics for success. So Juma, thank you so much for having me, sir, and letting me take over your podcast.
Thank you so much, Christine, for agreeing to take over the podcast. I couldn't think of a better person to do this with. You are not a first-timer. You've been in the podcast a couple times already, and you run your own podcast. So I know you're an experienced person who can do the job very, very well. So I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the vote of confidence. Thank you. All right, so let's dive into these video marketing tactics and a conversation about video marketing overall. Mm-hmm. Before we go into the 5 tactics that you mentioned to me, let's start by doing a level setting question and just explain to the audience what video marketing is. So how would you define video marketing?
Let's first talk about what content is. So content is any form of media used to communicate a message. And there are varying types of content. One of the most pervasive or popular types of content we have today is video content. And of course, there are other types of content that exist. There is audio content, there is text, there is images. But one of the most popular forms of content and the most ubiquitous forms of content is, in fact, video, because most, if not all, of the social media platforms use, promote, and actually give a preference to video, right? So, and so video marketing is the use of this type of media, video media, in order to reach the target customers that you want to know, like, and trust you. And so, of course, we know the system is that in order for people to ultimately buy from you and become loyal customers and advocates, they first have to discover who you are. They have to know what you can do for them and how you solve their problems. They have to trust that you can do that. And then at some point, they'll be like, okay, now that I have this problem that matches with what you sell or what you promote or the thing that you do, then I can now buy from you because I'm aware of you. And so that's what video marketing is. Video marketing is using that specific type of content, video content, in order to speak to your customers, to talk with them, and to get them to ultimately buy from you and become loyal customers.
And I love that you focused on the value of content, the purpose of content, which is to build the know, like, and trust factors with your audience. So stemming from that, if we're building the know, like, and trust factors using video, how do we use video to teach first and then sell?
There are many tactics that you can use in video. But in order to figure these things out, I had to look at my own content first, because it's always good to look at what you've been doing, what has been successful and what works for you. It might not be able to be used one-to-one for everybody else because each person has unique marketing needs, but it gives you an idea of what can work. And so when I looked at my video content for the past, how long did I look at? Oh, you know what I did? I looked at all the video content that I put on LinkedIn, but I looked at the top 25 pieces of content, the one by engagement. That's what I looked at. When I looked at that, I noticed a pattern. And the pattern was I had the top videos by engagement, because there are different ways you can measure it. I just use engagement in this particular example. The top pieces of content were educational pieces of content where I just straight out teach something about what I do and how I can help people. And then there was story-driven education where I teach people as well, but in the form of a story, something that had happened to me, happened to a client, and how I helped them, but I packaged it in a story format. And then there was behind the scenes or updates, which is showing the process, showing the things behind the scenes, or updates on how the company was going, things that we've done. And the last one was like expert interviews, me talking with other people about things that I know my audience would want to hear in the space that I offer services. So that could have been with a branding person, with a content person, with a graphic design person, with a video person, that type of thing. So we had expert interviews. But I found out when I looked at those 4 areas, 45% of my content was straight educational. 25% of my content was story-driven education. 20% of my content was BTS or updates. And 10% was expert interviews. And those were the top types of video content that I had. So what I did is I went in and I derived the principle from each of those percentages. And that's how we came up with the list today of the top 5 marketing tactics. The last one that we're going to mention is not one of the 4, but it's an interesting topic that we could get into. So that's how I came up with the list today. And so the first one, which is the 45% one, which is the highest return on content of video output for us, it has been the educational one, which you get from that. You get teach first, then sell. What that is based upon is that if you're thinking about what you want to do with your customers, the main thing that you want to build is this relationship. You want to build trust. Yeah. And so in order to build that trust, you have to be able to give them quick wins. You have to be able to prove to those people that you can do what you say you can do. You have to demonstrate that you can do the work. And one of the main ways in which you demonstrate you can do the work is by saying, this is a problem, this is how I solve it. You teach people how to solve particular problems. Now, I know there are many people who might say they don't want to share all of their trade secrets, or they don't want people to know exactly what they do. And my thoughts on this, and has been the thoughts of many other great marketers that I meet, which is that you educate people, you give education, and then you charge for the implementation thereafter. So you teach people how to solve the problems, you teach them about what you can do, how solving this problem would allow them to achieve their goals. You give them step-by-step, which I love to do step-by-steps. I love to do listicles. I love to do if this, then that type of educational content. And when you do that, then if you want thereafter, you can also charge for customized education. If there's something that the client wants to know, like in a consultation type of format, you can charge for that. But the main thing is that before you actually sell to them, you have to show them that you can do the thing. And how you show them that you can do the thing, by and large, is by educating or talking about how you actually solve these problems, showing that you can do it. And there's a deeper way to do that as well, but we'll get into that later. But the main thing is that you show them through education, through teaching them how to solve these problems step by step, that you can actually solve the problems. And you do that with video.
And you mentioned 2 types of education style content that you create. So you create listicles, you create if this, then that type of content. Are there any other examples that you could share with the audience?
Right. Okay. So listicles are great. Sometimes we give examples from, if you have this problem, then you do this. Another type, what is another type that we often do, that I often like to do? I often like to do breakdowns of things that we've done. So for example, if we did something for a client and they had this particular problem, we will talk about, it's almost like a case study, but it's not really a full-fledged case study. It's like a shortened version of that in a video format. We will say we went through this step with them, that step with them, this step with them, that step with them. I try to keep it between 3 and 5 points, because 2 is too little, over 5 is too much. 3 is like optimal, because we think as human beings, we think in a superlative, good, better, best type of thing. And so we will take what the client experience was, and then we'll break down what their challenges are, what we did for them. Some will identify how we helped them. We'll identify what our discussions for this particular project produced, and we'll break down these specific things. And we take the principles out of that. So a lot of times we do content that talk about the principles behind how we help clients as well, to educate people as to how we could actually help them. So we give those examples.
And one of the questions that came to me while I was preparing for this, which would fall into this step that we're discussing now, is, does the success of video content depend heavily on personality? So like when you're creating this educational content and, you know, you want to entertain your audience at the same time, but you don't have that type of personality to entertain the audience, do you think that impacts the success of the video?
I would say that it is highly, highly dependent. That's really subjective. Now, I would say that edutainment has become more and more of the type of content that people enjoy and want to see, mainly because what we realize is that many people do not necessarily want to just be told what to do. They want to be told what to do in a compelling way. And sometimes the way in which you do that is by entertaining as well as educating. Because the main thing about any piece of video content is that you do want to grab and keep their attention in the first 3 to 5 seconds. That is the danger zone. That's when people are going to fall off. And usually you do that with a really compelling hook, where how you can ask a question, you can make a provoking statement, you can use a fun visual or sound. There are different ways to do it. But sometimes if you do it in a entertaining way, or unusual way, a way that speaks to somebody's desire or piques their curiosity, then you can get them to stay for the video. That is tied to personality sometimes, but you can actually learn how to do that. The problem is that if that is not something that you like to do or that you're comfortable doing, it becomes more and more difficult as you get into it. And so I would say you have to develop your own style. And sometimes that style is not entertainment. Sometimes that style is straightforward education. And there are some people who will resonate with that as well. It is personality driven, but it's not necessarily entertainment driven. Although entertainment can give you an edge up on people who don't do it, because people are always willing to be entertained, you know, so that's how it goes sometimes.
Because how I feel with my video content sometimes, because I'm not an entertaining person, I'm more of an educational type of person. So and when I look at the engagement and those type of things, it gets discouraging. So it's like, I feel like I'm doing what you're saying, right? I'm educating, but then I'm not seeing the results come forth, you know? So like, how do we deal with situations like these where, you know, you feel like you're doing what should be educational content, but it's still not producing what you'd like?
Yeah, I wouldn't advise anyone to force themselves to do something that they're not comfortable with, because the ability to sustain that is going to be very, very hard.
Difficult.
It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to sustain that. If you make a very clear decision that you are going to entertain and you say, I'm going to be in this for the long haul. And when I say the long haul, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 years, because you have to develop your style, you have to develop a whole sort of different things. And then you have to transition away from what you are doing into the next thing that the people will get to know you for. And that takes time. And I understand it can be discouraging. I understand that sometimes you put out a video that you know has high value, but people just don't get to see it because it doesn't go far. And what we tell our clients about that is that you don't always have to see entertainment as something big. You can be subtle in the way you want to entertain. We could find ways that amplify your strengths in making people feel that you are trying to communicate with them in a way that's relatable as well. So we have to find a thing that works for you, because a lot of times people look at other people's videos and they say, well, they don't actually say it out loud, but in the back of their head, they say, I might have to do it like them in order to be successful. And that's not true.
Exactly.
That's not true. The thing that you're looking for is that you don't want to just stand out. You want to stand apart. So you don't just want to be different. You want to be unique in some way. And so I think that discovering what that could be takes a decision. Like, I am going to do edutainment. I'm going to test it. I'm going to sprinkle some of my own way of doing it into my content. I'm going to see what response I get. And if it gets a good response, I'm willing to double down on it and do more of it until I can see the needle move in the direction that I want it to go into. And so it's definitely a decision that has to be made based upon your goals and where you think your content should go. And sometimes it's a difficult thing because that's not what we're accustomed doing. But if you're willing and you make the decision, then yes, then you can be, today's the day I'm going to try something different and I'm going to do it. And if it works, I'm going to double down on it. And that's how it has to go.
So what I'm getting from what you're saying is that finding your style is important as you share your educational content, assessing how the content is performing, your video content is performing, and doubling down on what's working is crucial. So even though you may be putting out your educational video content and you're feeling like, wow, this is not working, keep at it, find your style, and double down on what works. And
Absolutely.
that leads me to the second video marketing tactic that you shared with me, which is telling stories about what you do. So how can we tell stories about what we do using video?
And this works the best for people who have been in business for a while, but it can work for people who have just started as well. The main thing about storytelling is this: it's not flat, right? It has to have interest, it has to have hills and valleys. Stories have to push and pull to keep people interested. So in a normal story structure, you have the hero, which is usually the person who you're talking to. We have the person who is talking to the hero. Then you have the villain, which is like the problem. So if you're encountering something, and then you have something that the person who you as and I'm going to use some of the Donald Miller language now, right? You as the guide who you're telling the person, okay, this is how you solve that problem. And you fix it for them in the story. And then they have a particular outcome. And so how it goes in the story arc, it goes like this. It goes, a person meets a problem, big change, comes out on the other side different. And there are many different models for telling stories. But generally, when you want to tell a story, you want to have some kind of challenge at the beginning, which is normally your client's problem. And you want to see how you overcame that. And you want to describe it in a way that is compelling. I will give an example of that. So I'm recently looking at some of my older videos and talking about, just checking to see how I had structured some of the videos. And one of the older videos I came across that I did was a video, because back in the days, I used to be a wedding photographer, right? For those who don't know, I used to be a wedding photographer. And I have lots of stories from wedding photography. The big problem is that I don't do that anymore. But all of my juicy stories are from that time.
From there.
Right? So the challenge is, how am I to take the principles I've learned inside of that career and apply it to this career? And how am I to take the stories from that time in my life and apply it to this time in my life? And all I need to look for are similar threads, are similar things that apply in marketing or in content creation, that applied in wedding photography. And I take those things and I tell the story and I import the principle across. So there was this one example where I had to go to do a destination wedding for a couple on the island of Anguilla. Anguilla is a beautiful place. There's a couple who came from the US. We shot their wedding there, Robin and Brian. And that was my first job out of being employed. It was my first full-time gig, right? And I wanted to do the job perfectly. So I did a lot of research. I did a lot of scouting on the island to find places. It turns out that the place I had found for us, one of the places I had found for us to do photos on, was very dangerous to go to. It was on some rocks, and the rocks could have potentially cut their feet. when they were working on it. And I actually sent them to walk across so I could get this beautiful shot over the water. And I realized when they were going that they were in trouble because they were kind of walking lightly. And I called them back when I realized there was danger. And I used that to talk about how you have to pay attention to your customer and how you have to to do things that are in your customer's best interest and not necessarily in your best interest first. So you have to put the customer first. So you have to have a customer first strategy anytime you're thinking about creating anything. And so I kind of took that story and I used it in the context of content strategy and creating content. And if you have any stories like that, where there is a particular goal you want to have to happen, then there is a challenge, and then there is a decision that changes the outcome. And so you have the start, which is the person in this particular state. There's a challenge, they overcome the challenge. They're now in this particular state, this future state that is better than they were before. And so that is how you generally would structure stories. And so I say that if you tell those stories, it makes you more memorable. It gives you social proof. It makes the content more compelling overall. And you could talk specifically about how you solve specific problems. And you have the option of showing how you do things and not just telling how you do things. If you have like video clips or you have examples or things of that nature, you have that whole idea of showing how you do things as opposed to just telling. Yeah.
I love that. And while you were sharing the story, I could actually visualize the people out there on the rocks and those type of things. So with storytelling, it's such a crucial way of getting people to actually visualize what's happening and connect with what you're sharing, which is very important with video content to get that connection. And one of the next point that you have is that with video marketing, one of the tactics you can use is to actually show your process.
Yeah.
So how can we use video to show our process?
So showing our process is what people call behind the scenes, or just, it could come in different ways. It could come in the form of showing your professional development. Like, for example, if you did something that is related to how you deliver work. So, for example, I know people go for certifications, they go for classes. That's part of showing your process. It gives weight to how you can deliver services. You might say, this is a development inside of my company. This is a new employee, or this is somebody new on the marketing team. That is also showing your process. You can show how you do the actual work. You could do things like customer calls. You could show how you go out into the field. If you go out into the field for your job, you could show how you have meetings with clients. Once you're showing things that is not necessarily solving the problem that you solve for your clients, but you're showing how you solve the problem for your clients, the behind the scenes of it, that is showing your process. And it gives the audience insight into how you do the work. It's a massive trust building mechanism. And so when they see that you do the work and they see that you've been putting in effort into your personal development, company development, they see that your company is adding employees. So it tells them that, oh, this company is successful, they're stable. It adds weight to how you can help them and how they can trust you. So it's a big trust building mechanism. And I could safely say that a lot of the work we get directly from video content has been because of this type of content where we show the process, we show behind the scenes. And people say, oh, I didn't think about it that way, or I didn't know you could do it. Because sometimes in education, you can't show certain details, but when you show the behind the scenes, you show how you do the process, you talk about that specifically, people get to see how you do the thing. And they get to say, oh, this is your step 1, your step 2, your step 3 in delivering this. And thus it builds trust with them even faster.
Interesting. And I like that you mentioned that in showing the process, especially for a company, you can actually highlight employees, you can highlight your staff, because your staff members are part of the process too. They're the ones who are doing the work. They're the ones who are getting the client, the outcomes that they're seeking. So showcasing employees is actually a way to show your process. I love that. I love that thought.
Yeah.
And the next tactic that you mentioned is borrowing authority. So how do we borrow authority?
One of the things that I discovered along the way is that I don't know everything. I don't know everything. I know some things
Mm-hmm.
about some things. I know a lot about other things. I'm an expert at other things, but there are many things I do
Mm-hmm.
not know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there are a few ways to learn. You could read books, you could look at videos, you could take a course or do some educational part of your development. One of the major ways you could learn is just sitting down and talking with experts in the same space that you're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what that does, it does two things. And I really only talk to people who I want to learn from. It's kind of selfish
Mm-hmm.
in that way, but also I assume that the content that I make for my audience is the same thing that I would want to know. And so when they talk with me, I then give my audience the content that they want. And it doesn't matter that they're my competitor. It doesn't matter that they are more experienced. Well, it's good that if they're more experienced than me. They could even be less experienced than me, but there might be a specific thing that I would want my audience to know that this person knows. And so what
Mm-hmm.
happens is that when you interview people, you talk with them, you collaborate on content or anything of that nature, you borrow the person's authority. It's a little bit of like what's
Mm-hmm.
happening here today, where I know you want
I
to
borrowed
talk
your authority.
a little bit, and I have borrowed your authority in the past because I've gotten great comments on your podcast episodes from people and how you
Oh.
talk and so on, and I like the content that you make. And so when you associate with people who know what they're doing and people know that they know what they're doing, it bumps your profile up, as in, you're associated with this. It's kind of like the halo effect, where people assume things about you based on one particular trait. If I am
Right.
hanging out with Christine, who is an excellent content marketer, excellent content strategist, then
Mm-hmm.
they say, oh, by extension, and Juma is asking these questions to Christine, he must know something about content strategy and content marketing.
Exactly.
And so if you're able to talk to people in the industry, in your space, experts, and you can ask them great questions, or you can be asked great questions by them, then people come to associate you with this person, and it helps you borrow their authority essentially, and you build up your profile in that way. And doing that on video is one of the best ways to get that done, like seeing the conversation between you and the person. And I will give an example of that. So recently, I interviewed one of my all-time favorite marketers, YouTubers, content creators, Chris Do, right? And
Whoa!
yeah,
He's a big deal, yeah.
Yeah, and I had been following him for a number of years. And one of the things that I did deliberately and I had not done this with anybody else before, I just kind of took a frame from us in the studio like this, and I just dropped it in a comment and say, "Hey, look at this is what's happening soon," just to build that authority. And so now on my LinkedIn page, in the featured section, I have us talking together. So when somebody comes to my page, they will see that and say, "Oh, this person has sat in the same digital room with Christo," and thus your profile is increased almost immediately. That wasn't the intention. I wanted to really learn from Chris, which I did. But then, of course, if you have the content, you have the content, and so therefore use it to your advantage as well. So
exactly.
Doing that is a good way you can utilize video in that way.
Yeah, it's a twofold effect, because as you said, you're learning from the person, but at the same time, you are borrowing their authority. You're associating yourself with a known expert, and that therefore increases your credibility. And that's why I love video podcasts so much. It's one of my favorite types of content to create. And I believe it's such a strong content marketing tactic, and it's something that a lot more companies can get value out of. And that leads to the next and the final point out of these 5 video marketing tactics. And you said that this one could be a conversation in itself. It could be an entire episode in itself.
Yes, it could be.
So
it could be.
How can we maximize our content creation styles? It's a big one.
So this is a big one. And this is specifically for video, because I know other people struggle with how they are supposed to create content, or what's the best way that they can create video content, right?
Right.
So over time of dealing with clients and over time of speaking with creators and over time of my own experience and observing the market in general, I've come to the conclusion that most people fall into one of three categories of video content creators by and large. One of three categories. The first two are probably well known. The last one is probably lesser so, or maybe there might be, depending on who you are, you might know it. And when I say it, you will know, Christine, because you fall into these categories too. But for people who don't know and haven't thought about it, they might not know. So the first one, the first type of content creator is a spontaneous content creator, right? And you could kind of figure out what that is from the name. The second one is a batch content creator. That's a B type. So the first one is S type. The second one is B type, which is they batch content create. And the third one is a core content creator, which I'll explain and it'll make absolute sense when I explain it. So spontaneous content creators are people who basically embrace the moment to create content. They thrive on the immediacy and the authenticity of creating content. And they create this kind of raw, fresh content, and it does capture the moment, but it's not based on any particular structured planning. So these spontaneous content creators often use like simple tools like their mobile phone or maybe a mobile editing app or maybe a mobile phone tripod, and they allow their ideas to flow naturally and reflect the real-time events happening to them in their business or their personal experiences, and that's how they create content. So these are the S-type content creators. Batch content creators are content creators who like to maximize on the efficiency of creating content. So they dedicate very, very specific time to content creation, and they record multiple videos in a session. And I know you've probably done that before, right? And,
yes.
and what they then do, they then edit and strategically schedule those videos for release across various platforms to maximize how the videos are created. And they optimize their investment in the time they use to create the content by ensuring that the audience will get consistent engagement across all these platforms without the need for continuous production. And so they batch content create. And the last one, the core content creators, are people. I thought I was a core content creator, like mostly, but I surprised myself when I assessed my videos for the last, from January till now. I surprised myself a little bit. But the core content creators are people who focus on creating, let's just say, substantial, high quality, long form pieces of content. That could be through a podcast or through a live show or something of that nature. And these can obviously be repurposed into shorter form content and impactful segments for distribution across multiple platforms. And this person emphasizes the approach to the depth of information and strategic reuse. That's what this person does. And how they do it ensures for a continuous flow of engaging video content across multiple platforms as well over a long period of time. And also this person is big on reusing content. They will go back and they will create what we call evergreen, which is content that stays relevant for a long time, and they'll reuse it over and over again. So
you said that you thought that you were a core content creator, but you realized that you weren't. So which one are you?
Well, what I realized, I did the assessment on myself. I went back and I looked at my 50 top performing videos by engagement on LinkedIn. This is specifically on LinkedIn. This is not counting TikTok or any other place. So I found that my type was, I'm 46.8% core content creator. I am 31.9% spontaneous content creator, and I am 21.3% batch content creator, so B-type content creator. So I thought I was more batch than spontaneous. It turns out, apparently, I'm being more spontaneous than I thought. But by and large, most of my content is from large pieces of content that gets repurposed. And this is all video, by the way. All of these are video, and of course, then you could take that video and you could do lots of stuff with it, with your text and with your images and all that drama. But this is specifically video.
So how, before you move to the next point, how did you do that assessment with the 50 videos? You just counted the videos that fell into each category and then you determined.
Right. So I did it the manual, I did it the hard way. I have a tool for LinkedIn that I can look at all my top engaged videos. It can work on anybody's content, by the way. In fact, this is coming up more and more often, and maybe I should just tell people about the tool sometime. So
You should.
I should.
What
I
is
should.
the tool, Juma?
I should. Okay, well, let me tell you what it is. It's a plugin for, is it called a plugin? Is it called an extension? It's called an extension for Google Chrome called Clio.
Okay.
That's Kleo.
KLEO.
And you install it. And what it does is that you could go to anyone's page on LinkedIn and you can see all of their content ranked by engagement, ranked by comments, ranked by shares, ranked by all of these different markers. Anyone's once you go to their profile and the extension is engaged, and you can see all of their videos, you can see all of their text posts, you can see all of their document posts, and you can categorize them. You can look at the dates, you can look at the range. And so basically if I want to see how somebody's content is performing, like if I want to see what you did in the last month, I can go to your page, select the video stuff, see which one gets the most engagement by, of course, that is like reactions and so on LinkedIn. And I can look at all of, and so it gives me a lot of data about how people create. And so I use that as a tool to go around and snoop and see what people are doing. So if I want to do research for a podcast, I could use that, I use that a lot of time for podcasts. If I want to find out what's the first piece of content you ever released, video piece of content you ever released, was the most engaging one you ever released, was the one that got the most comments, what piece of text content got people talking the most. I can see all those different things. And so
that is a cool tool. I like that.
It is a cool tool. I've been using it for months now. I've been gatekeeping it for months.
Yes, and you've been snooping on people's.
I've been snooping. I've been using it. I've been mainly using it for research for the podcast and also research in general. Like if I want to find out about what some of these top creators are doing and see, sometimes people make claims and I want to see if their claims are true, I can actually go and check it. I could actually go check the claims. And sometimes they are.
Which is right.
Sometimes they aren't.
They aren't.
They are not, right? But I'm saying all this to say is that if you determine what type of content creator you are, then you can maximize any way you create video content. And you can see what works for you. So I haven't done it yet, but the plan is to have like a questionnaire that talks about these specific markers. Let me give you some ideas as to what that might look like. I think I may have done, let me give you some questions. So if I were to ask a question, do you find yourself often inspired by events happening around you? Are you comfortable improvising content without extensive planning? Do you prefer capturing moments as they happen rather than scripting them? So you can tell all those questions are designed to find out whether or not this person would be a spontaneous content creator. And if they were to answer yes, then it will do some tallying behind the scenes, and it will tell you probably are going to be the best, most successful creating like this. And so you kind of eliminate.
You should create a newsletter. You should create a newsletter and use it as a lead magnet and get some subscribers.
Yeah. I've been sitting on this for a while. I have to figure out. You see, my problem is that I tend to, I have the problem with wanting it to be the best version of this thing, so I have to kind of stop that. So I've kind of done a lot of work on it now, and I have examples. I actually have people, I have faces that I can use because I've interviewed these people, so I could take what they told me about their creation and use them as actual examples. And then I have myself as an example, which I like to use myself too, and put myself in the mix, and talk about those things. But the point is that when you answer these questions, you'll be able to, as a tactic, know, okay, this is the best way I can create if I want to create. My best bet for success is to be spontaneous. My best bet for success with video is to batch create. My best bet is to create a long form piece of content and repurpose it. And if you know that, then you are able to maximize the way you create content, and your chances of success are immediately higher because you go into the game with two eyes wide open about how you best create. And I think that is the last point I want to make about a video as a video tactic that people can use in order to be successful with video content.
And it's a powerful video marketing tactic that I think a lot of us overlook, because many of us think that, okay, everybody is saying that you should create long form content and repurpose it. So that means that everybody must create content that way. You shouldn't be spontaneous. You shouldn't batch create. You should just focus on just creating one big thing and then repurposing it. When that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. As you're saying, you have to find the content creation style that works for you and double down on that. It has to be very specific to you and your audience. So that tool that you mentioned, Clio, such an important tool for us to assess our content and see what actually is working. And before we close out, there's one key question that I wanted to ask. It seems very simple on the surface, but I just wanted to get your perspective on it. What does success from the perspective of video marketing look like? So what is video marketing success?
All right, so the success could be different things to many different people, and I wouldn't venture to define success as a broad umbrella. But what I do know is that in order for something to be successful, you have to know what you want to get out of it. That is the main thing. You have to know what you want to get out of it. Now, if we were to be very generic, we could say success is a profitable business. But, you know, if you're not profitable in business, you'll soon be out of business. So that can't really be the marker, right?
Right.
So you have to determine what is the intermediate step in between the video and the profitable business that determines your success. Sometimes that might be growing your email list, and doing that via video might be a success. Sometimes that might be getting greater reach, greater impressions, because you want your name out there. You want to be known for something. So you create content that gets you greater impressions. Sometimes that might be, I want these number of inbound leads. I want 10 inbound leads per month. And so I create content specifically for that purpose. And if you do that, you can confidently ignore all other markers. So then likes shouldn't bother you. Lack of likes shouldn't bother you. Lack of comments shouldn't bother you. If your aim is reach, then lack of DMs shouldn't bother you. But if your aim is DMs, then lack of reach shouldn't bother you once you're hitting those markers. And you craft the video content specifically to get those particular goals, because that is what you want to go for. So in order for you to know what success is, you have to know, why am I creating this content this way? And that's the main thing when you talk about success in video marketing.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Juma. Excellent job. This has been an excellent conversation. I'm looking forward to sharing this with the world, because I think you shared some really valuable insights. And just to wrap things up, are there any key takeaways that you'd like to leave with your audience and my audience, since I'm the guest host here today?
All I would like to say is that whatever type of content creation that you choose, you have to experiment inside of it. It's not a one and done thing. Whatever you end up being could change over time, depending on your needs, depending on your life, depending on how your business goes. You might not even end up being the person who creates in your business anymore. It might be given off to someone else. So you have to experiment, and you have to be very flexible in the way you create video content. And I want to thank you, Christine, for being such a great guest host and for asking such excellent questions. And, and for people who want to go across and check Christine out on LinkedIn, and we'll probably leave her particulars in the show notes as well. So you can go check her out. She does excellent content. And she really is highly undervalued in the content marketing market as of now, but hopefully that will change very soon, right? So we want that to happen.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So thank you, Juma, for having me. It has been a pleasure, and I look forward to our audiences getting immense value from this conversation. See you soon.
Right. And all you have to say now is Useful Content Classroom dismissed.
Okay. Useful Content Classroom dismissed.
And we're clear. That's how it usually goes. That's how it usually goes. Thanks so much, Christine. Excellent
Thank you so much, Juma. I love this. This was nice.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot.
Yeah.
You have my brain spinning now to say, oh, I need to do this. I need to do this. Yeah.
It's good to ventilate some of these things sometimes. It's like, and it's good to have a conversation with somebody who can ask the questions that will spark the thought. Because trust me, I have like pages of things that I went through. I actually recently had a coaching call with a one-on-one coaching call, which I don't usually do. But this person had asked me to do a one-on-one coaching call with them. And I brought this exact thing up, these types of how they create content. And it was very valuable to them. And they said, oh, I hadn't thought about it like that. I don't necessarily have to do it this way. Because I think they were looking at somebody and they were getting all caught up in how the person was doing it. I said, well, that might not work for you. Right. You could try these things instead. And it was very valuable to them. So what I did, that's a recorded call. I took that call, I transcribed it. I took the transcript, and guess what? I put it in ChatGPT, and I said, to pull out the points out of this for me, give me some questions that I can ask. And that is what the whole basis of this thing was today.
I love this. I love how you just capitalize on every conversation, on every piece of thing you create. You just leverage the hell out of it.
Yeah. I'm trying to do that, Gil. It's sad. Too much work. You're doing too much work to leave it on the table. Trust me.
So true.
Doing too much work to leave it on the table. You try and get the value out of all of these interactions that you have, because I am not about, listen, I can't be spontaneous the way some people are, which is like create. I rather have conversations, and then out of those conversations, you're able to pull out the important things and the things that are helpful to people. So that's the way it has to go.
Love it too. Yeah, that's the way it has to go.
All right, great. So we got some post-show conversation in. Let me now stop the recording. Yeah, at this point. Where is the stop button?
Oh, and I love that you started this whole after class thing. Like, is it after class? If it's called?
Yes, after class. Yeah.
Yes, I watched Cher Jones, the one that you do, Cher Jones, and that was interesting. And I like it.
Yeah. Sometimes and this is what happens sometimes on the podcast. What I've begun, and I should do this more, what I've begun doing is I've begun taking the end, like this conversation with us now, and using it as an after class piece. So I might not include it in the whole podcast. Or sometimes we have a chat before. So I've started recording as soon as people come into the room now. Before I never used to do that. And trust me, there are some interesting conversations that happen before you start the official podcast.
So true.
It's beautiful, trust me. And I just take that and say, okay, this is value for people. We're going to use that. So Cher Jones is a darling. She's very, very competent and very, very excellent at what she does, you know? So, all right, let me really stop now this time. Yeah. The Useful Content Podcast is brought to you and produced by Relate Studios. You can see the work we do at our website, relatestudios.com. If you like what you've heard on the podcast today, please follow, leave a rating, and come back next week for another great episode. And if you want to get more useful content in between that, you can follow me, Juma Bannister, on LinkedIn. See you soon in the Useful Content Classroom. But until then, don't forget to make useful content.